Hello everyone. Nice to be here. My name is Josson. I'm a family physician from Sweden. And I want to thank Helen and Sue for having us here at this wonderful university. It's a fantastic campus you have here. And I'm going to give a talk about Neolithic diet and leptin resistance. I'm from Sweden. I work in the south of Sweden, but as a family physician. But I'm also a researcher into Paleolithic diet, Paleolithic nutrition. And I want to start out by apologizing about the presentation. It's not as good as I was hoping it to be, and there are probably some faults in it. And my English is not the best. It's kind of Swedish, so I sound a bit like the Muppets. So I apologize for everything. Okay, so this talk is going to be a talk about a monument. And there's going to be some old guys, swine and mice, doors, and a health station. My old health station. There's going to be one graph, just the one, and there's going to be a flying machine at the end. Okay. So, and they said I was going to talk for 45 minutes, which freaks me out. So I will try to fill in the gaps, and then you can ask a lot of questions at the end, I hope. Okay. So I'm going to start off with a monument. So this is Stonehenge. It's a Neolithic monument. And it's a prehistoric monument. It's close by here in Wiltshire, England. Is that correct? Yes, thank you. So it was constructed like 5,000 to 4,000 years ago. And as many as up to 4,000 people gathered here for midwinter, midsummer festivals, and that's a lot of people. So just the sheer number tells us something about who they were, and also the archaeology tells us that they were farmers and living in the Stone Age. They were Neolithic farmers, and they gathered at the feast, and they were eating wheat, barley, beans, peas, lentils, pig, cattle, sheep, goats, and dairy products. So they were farmers, and as we have heard before, farming it arose about 12,000 years ago, not here in Britain, but in the Middle East, in the Fertile Crescent for the first time. And this is a very, very important thing. Farming and this way of life leads to civilization and internet and blogging and so forth. So it's very, very, very important. So farming, why is it so important? The immediate result is it's a large increase in food productivity. So you could have a much higher population density, start living in farming communities and villages. You could stop living in nomadic small bands and settle down. So this is so important that it gives a name. That's the name Neolithic. It means the start of this farming technology. And you don't get it right away from the name. So neo, new, and lithic stone. So new stone. It wasn't a new stone at all. It was still the Stone Age, but it's just this difference in what they were doing. They were farming, they were settling down, and the exponential increase in our technologies started from there. Okay, so Neolithic, we have that. So before 12,000 years ago, was the Paleolithic. So paleo is old, so old stones, but it doesn't mean they were using old stones. They were using stones, okay? So it's the Stone Age all the same, but it's just that farming gets introduced in the Neolithic. So these people, they were eating a Neolithic diet. The diet I was talking about, the wheat and the barley and so forth. So that's a Neolithic diet. And before that, they were eating a Paleolithic diet. As we've heard examples, then Paleolithic diet could be very different depending on where you were living, on the coast or inland or on an island and so forth. Okay, so just to get you straight on these concepts. The Paleolithic started about 2.5 million years ago. The Stone Age, when we started using stone tools, that's what the lithic refers to, stone tools. So 2.5 million years up until 12,000 years ago. That's about 250 times as long as the Neolithic. So the Paleolithic wins. Okay? Just when you talk about time, at least. Okay, so why bother about the Paleolithicum? Because, as I said, the Neolithicum, very important, and everything good happens after it. But so Paleolithicum is very interesting because of the stuff we heard before, the interest in the impact on health. Okay, so I was thinking about maybe making a detour here, but I think I will skip it. Okay, so moving on. So we'll start with the old guys. We'll start with Stephen Boyden. He's a British veterinary surgeon, and he wrote an article called Evolution and Health, published in 1973. And he started talking about diseases of civilization. And I think he's very important. So he started this way of thinking about the problem here. And he's interesting for a number of reasons. He was born in south of London and lived there in the urban environment. But when he was 5, he moved south to Epsom, yeah, in Surrey. So, okay, so he's a local guy, yeah, and that's also makes him very interesting here. So he moved here, and apparently and then it was not suburban like today. It was a rural area. So the nature made a big impact on him. So he lived close to the nature, and he was interested in the animals. So he wanted to work and do something with animals. And when he went to school, it was a boys' school. All they were studying was mathematics, technology, and so forth. There was no biology class. So, and he wanted to do it. So he talked to the staff, the headmaster. I want to do biology. Okay, then you have to go to the girls' school next door to do the biology class. And so he did, and it worked out very well. He said, to go to the girls. Yeah. So he was interested in animals. He wanted to be a veterinary surgeon, so he went to London and studied. It was during the Second World War, so he actually studied in Reading. But he had good teachers, and they were especially good at teaching him about bacteria and immunology. And he did some interesting tests, and he found some interesting result on bacteria and agglutination, where the blood cells stick together. And he got very excited until he read that two American researchers had already presented this interesting result. But he still thought it was very positive because his teachers encouraged him and said, this is great, you should go to these researchers live in New York and spend a year there. And he got some money and he went there. And he says that this is a very important phase of his life. This was, what's the name? René Dubos and Middlebrook. So and this guy, René, the senior researcher in New York, like Stephen Boyden, he was interested in nature and evolution and impact on human health. And obviously, they were taking these long walks and talking about stuff, immunology, but also about human health and impact of how we live. And he also encouraged him to think. You have to think for yourself. And if you have silly ideas or crazy ideas, you should embrace them, talk about them, present them to the people around you. He says, I have had many crazy, bad ideas, wrong ideas, and wrong tests and hypotheses. But he always thought that was very important. So anyway, where was I? He went on to work with immunology in Denmark and finally settled down in Australia. And in the later part of his career, he wrote this article on evolution and health. And in it, he makes this interesting statement that he refers back to Darwin and his theory that the conditions, if the conditions of life of an animal deviate from those which prevail in the environment in which the species evolved, the likelihood is that the animal will be less well suited to the new conditions than those to which it has become genetically adapted through natural selection. And consequently, some signs of maladjustment may be anticipated. And he thought, he knew his evolution. He knew this is obvious, but when he read the medical literature, he saw very little signs of people thinking this way. He could only find two references to it in his medical books. And he thought that this is important for human health. And he says that an examination of reports on the reasons why patients visit their physicians in the most developed countries in the Western society today shows clearly that the majority of the disorders of which they complain fit into this category, and he calls them diseases of civilization. So that's where this term comes from in this paper. In the sense that they would have been rare or non-existent in primeval society. And by primeval he means the hunter-gatherer period of human existence before domestic transitions. So he means before Neolithic times. And he gives examples of these diseases as cardiovascular disease, obesity, diabetes. Okay, so he stated the problem and that it's due to Darwinian principles. Okay, and I think that's the reason why we're all here today. Yesterday I went to Darwin's home, Down House, got this T-shirt. This is this is supposed to be the picture from his notebook where he first drew the idea of the tree of life, where they start, and so some branches die out and some live on to today. Okay, so right. Okay. Yes. So that was one old guy, and the next two old guys are Burkitt and Trowell. Burkitt is a British surgeon, and Trowell is a British physician. And they wrote an article, Western Diseases, Their Emergence and Prevention, published in 1981. And that's where the term Western disease comes from. So, and Burkitt was in Africa, and they're obviously, Trowell directed his attention to a boy with a swollenness close to his jaw, and he started examining this boy, and that's how they could find this Burkitt lymphoma. So Burkitt has been done a lot of good things, but they've also done this article, and about these Western diseases. He writes that in recent years, several doctors with long years of experience of teaching in medical schools in southern Africa has coined the term Western diseases for disorders where the incidence increases in black population as their diet and lifestyle become westernized, and a fair number of cases are found nowadays in African upper socioeconomic groups, as we have seen before in the graphs talked about before. So the title Western diseases is preferred to that of the diseases of civilization, which Stephen Boyden has had mentioned, for it proved it was obnoxious to teach African and Asian medical students that their communities had a low incidence of these diseases because they were uncivilized. So instead we'll call it Western diseases. So that's where the term comes from. Right. Moving on. Thomas McKeown, British physician. He wrote a book, The Origin of Human Disease, in 1988, and he uses the term diseases of affluence. So he was a professor of social medicine. He's most famous for the McKeown hypothesis, or McKeown something ID. So he provoked the medical community when he said that the people had become much healthier after the Industrial Revolution, not because the doctors work, but because of the economic growth, the affluence of the community. But he also wrote this book, and he talked about this, the same thing like Boyden. He noted that evolution moves very slowly, that some diseases are rare or absent in hunter-gatherers, and in social medicine he could see the epidemiology that certain diseases were much more common after industrialization and when the communities became affluent. So that's why he called them diseases of affluence. It's cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, obesity. So he put the finger on the Industrial Revolution at that time. But as archaeology and autopsy studies have shown before, that these diseases existed before the Industrial Revolution, but they were much more rare. They were found in old Egyptian societies, in mummies, In medieval times in Italy, it has been shown in mummies. It has been talked about in antique literature, and Indian literature have talked about diabetes cases and so forth. So the diseases were there, but they were not rare, become more prevalent until Industrial Revolution. So that's the term diseases of affluence, which I think it's a bit misleading if we think that this all started with the Industrial Revolution. So if it's not Industrial Revolution and they were present before, then the next thing to look at would be the invention of agriculture, the start of the Neolithic, when we started eating the same kind of food that they were eating at Stonehenge. So the cereal grains and dairy products. Okay. Right. And then came the paper Staffan mentioned early in his presentation, which he read. And it's by Boyden, Eaton, and Connor. It's an American radiologist, Boyden, Eaton, and a physician, Connor, to the right. They wrote an article in 1985 called Paleolithic Nutrition. And that's where the term Paleolithic diet comes from. So that's where this started. And actually, in the article, they call it the late Paleolithic diet, at least in a table. But in the text, they call it Paleolithic diet a couple of times. So, okay. Here. They also noted this that genetics change slowly, and that since the evolution of agriculture, they think it had a minimal influence on our genes. Certain like retention of intestinal lactase into adulthood were some recent genetic evolutionary trends showing adaptation to new diets. But otherwise, they, like Boyden and others before him, talked about that our genes are probably not adapted to the new diet, and like Boyden said, we can expect some signs of maladjustments. Okay. Yeah, and the rest, they talk about pretty much the same, like Staffan talked about, that when the hunter-gatherers communities adopt Western lifestyle, they also get their diseases. So this was an important paper. This started off Staffan's work, and I know Lauren Cordain's also read this paper, and that's when he started doing his work. Why did they call it the late Paleolithic diet? Well, it was because they thought that much of the evidence for this thesis comes from looking at hunter-gatherers. What diseases do they have? They don't have these diseases. Okay, so what kind of life are they living? Well, they thought that okay, it's probably more like the late Paleolithic. So that's why they call it the late Paleolithic diet. And by that, they meant that they were eating a fair amount of carbohydrates and vegetables. Okay. So Staffan, he's a Swedish physician, and he's already talked to you about the Kitava study. And also written this book, Food and Western Diseases. Fantastic book. You should all get it. When I started working as a physician, I met Staffan and talked to him. and I was not very interested in nutrition, and I'm still not very interested in nutrition, actually. So lots of people here are much more knowledgeable than I, but I was always interested in evolution and the Darwinian way of thinking, because I like it when someone tells you something and suddenly it makes sense. There's an order to it. So when Staffan explained this theory, I thought it was very interesting indeed. So he became my PhD tutor, and we have done some research together. And I'm going to tell you about this very quickly. Okay, so the first study we did was an animal study. It was on Paleo Piglets. The article also tells you about the result. Paleolithic diet confers higher insulin sensitivity, lower CRP, lower blood pressure than cereal-based diet in domestic pigs. So we took a Paleolithic diet, compared it to the feed you give to the pigs. It's mostly cereal-based. In Sweden, they call it kraftfoder. It's power feed. They know that the swines, they grow fast and they become fat on this food, which we also eat, power food. So we become tall and fat. Yes. So it was 23 domestic swine, and they were randomized, and they ate it from age 2 to 17 months of age. So when I got to write up this article, and my biggest problem when writing this was the curve here, which is their weight. So the group eating cereal grains, they weighed more. They were longer and they weighed more. And the Paleolithic group, they were smaller. Okay? And they were given food by an experienced farmer. And they were not given food just handed out, eat as much as you like, because that's not the tradition in Sweden. And there were also concerns about the farmer. He was not used to giving them Paleolithic food. So he was giving them food which he deemed that it was enough for them, and they were healthy on it. Okay, so I was thinking, okay, what have we done in this study? Have we starved them? Have this group been starved? And that's why we see the results in the title. But if you starve someone, if you eat too little calories, calorie restriction, you could get these results, but usually then your body temperature gets lowered by 1 or 2 degrees. And that was not the case here, because they had the same body temperature. When you look at the Paleolithic group, their weight, it's well within the normal range for pigs, for wild pigs. Okay, so perhaps they were not starved. Perhaps it's the other group that is a bit abnormal. Perhaps they are a bit fat. And they had much more mid-sternal fat than the other group. Okay, so I talked about this in the article. Okay, if it's not that, okay, something made the other group eat very much more and become fat. Perhaps their satiety was disturbed by this food. So that started my whole thinking and the direction of my research. Satiety and disturbances of our satiety. Leptin, like Staffan mentioned, is the satiety hormone. So it is secreted by fat, goes to the brain, tells the brain how much fat do I have, and then the article adjusts how much you eat. Okay? It's a very, very central hormone for the body. It regulates how we eat, our metabolism, our reproduction, immunology, bone health, etc., etc. If you have too little fat, it turns off reproduction, like women athletes, they stop menstruating. It's an important hormone. When they found it, they thought that they had cracked the problem with people getting fat. But when they looked at people, humans, they realized that they did not have too little leptin. Instead, they have high levels of leptin, and they have leptin resistance, like insulin resistance, that even though you inject them with leptin, they won't stop eating because they are resistant to the effects of leptin. And so the way I had started thinking, we published a theoretical article, agrarian diet, like Neolithic diets with cereal grains, and diseases of affluence. Do these new proteins cause leptin resistance? I don't think the article is quite right, but I still think it's an interesting thought. So when we did the first human Paleolithic randomized controlled trial, which Staffan performed at the Lund University, at the heart intensive care units, which have these doors, as you see here, we got these results. Improvement in glucose tolerance when compared to Mediterranean-like diet. It was 29 men. They had ischemic heart disease, glucose intolerance, or type 2 diabetes, and waist circumference greater than 94 centimeters. And they were randomized. There were two groups and compared. We did a follow-up publication from this because when they did their food registration, we also looked at satiety because we were interested in this now. So they scored for each meal how hungry they were before and after eating. Because we wanted to know, when you eat a Paleolithic diet, do you go around and you're hungry all the time or not? What do you think? Were they as satiated as the other group, the Mediterranean group? Those who think that they were equally satiated, you can raise your hands now. Yeah. Okay, and those who think that the Paleolithic diet were more hungry, you can raise your hands now. No one. Okay, so okay. So anyway, it turned out that they were equally satiated. They were equally full when they were eating. But Paleolithic diet needed less calories in getting there. Okay, so they were more satiated per calorie than the Mediterranean diet. And that's a good quality. If you're going to eat a diet, that's a good quality for the diet, that it's satiating. And we also measured leptin in these patients. It was close to a significant effect. It was actually just one patient who was eating a lot of cereal grains, but he was in the Paleolithic group who was the problem. If you removed him, the result was significant, a difference in drop of leptin between these two groups. So there seemed to be an effect on the satiety and on leptin, the satiety hormone. My first RCT was similar, but in a health station. That's my old health station. This was a crossover study. It's only 13 patients, but it's crossover, so they do both diets. We got some beneficial effects. It was on long-term sugar, lipids, hypertension, weight, waist circumference. So it was nice study, similar results, and we also did a follow-up article on this satiety. It was the same result. They were equally satiated, but they needed less calorie in the Paleolithic group. So it was more satiating per calorie than, in this case, versus diabetes diet. We also asked them in a questionnaire, what do you think about the diets? From the answers we got, they thought that, well, the diet is good for losing weight, but it's tough to stay on. Okay. And a couple of weeks ago, we also published a result on leptin. And here we got a clear result that we saw a decrease in leptin concentrations from the Paleolithic diet. So, what's the problem here? What does the Paleolithic diet and the other diets, they have different effects on satiety and leptin. So we were thinking that perhaps the cereal grains directly affects leptin in our body. Perhaps they are blocking the effect of leptin on the receptor. So we went to the lab, and after 10 years or something of trying to get a result, finally we got this graph. We published it last year. Digested wheat gluten inhibits binding between leptin and its receptor. And this is fantastic, I think. Okay? So if this result holds in more research, it is very, very interesting. So we took normal wheat gluten, digested it with our gut enzymes, and we tested it in the machine where leptin binds to its receptor. And the higher concentrations of these gluten peptides means that the leptin binding decreases. So the more gluten you eat, the less leptin works, the less the brain gets the signal. So it thinks that I have less fat than I do. So it will want to have more to eat. And these gluten peptides have been measured in plasma and breast milk, and we know that those levels, they are here somewhere, the normal levels. So that would mean that we have quite some blocking going on all the time. And we are eating gluten on a daily basis, continually filling up this blocking problem. So this is really interesting, and what we are trying to do more research on. So the final picture here, the future, here's the flying machine, what is going on now. So more lab studies on gluten and leptin, and it's going very, very slowly. It's really hard to do lab studies. I know very little about it, but the persons working on it, they are very good, but it takes a lot of time, a lot of testing to get things right. We want to do a bigger study on Paleolithic diet. As you saw, it was small studies. We have to do bigger studies to impact the nutrient recommendation, the diet recommendations. They will not look at small studies. We have to do bigger studies. And that means money, which we don't have. So we need to get much more money to get these studies done. How much time do I have? Like a second?
About it, yeah.
Yeah. So the last thing we are looking at now is Paleolithic ratio. We are calculating from the old studies what did they eat, how much was actually Paleolithic, the way we define it. We have some interesting results there. So in Staffan's study, the Paleolithic group were eating around 85% Paleolithic. The Mediterranean group were eating around 40% Paleolithic. But when we started writing up this article, we immediately got problems because the group had to decide on what is Paleolithic. And that's a big problem. What do you think? What do you think? What should be included? What should not be included? And so forth. And that will be very interesting to write about, I think. And that's an article coming soon, hopefully, in the autumn. Yes, that was it. Thank you.
Questions for Tommy?
Where can I buy that T-shirt?
At Downhouse, Darwin's home. Guy?
I have a question about and it is the reason I raised my finger, in your interrogation. In my practice, when I advise my patients to go less to eat less carbs and to go less or more to a paleo diet. The main problem is that they are always angry. That's the reason I raised them. They are always angry.
They are always angry
Yeah.
when they cut the carbs.
Angry.
Hungry, sorry.
Not angry.
Okay.
Well,
It's the same thing. Okay. They were hungry.
Their wife said, "Oh, he's very angry."
He's angry also.
He is hungry.
He is hungry.
This is not during phenomenon. It is mainly the 4 or 6 weeks after the advisement. You know, and the advice I did. So, what can you comment about that?
I don't know much about it actually.
Actually, I could probably.
Yeah,
comment a little
perhaps
bit.
you could.
So,
Yeah.
when we switched people over to our paleo diet, we put them on such a high fruit and vegetables. Like we switched so many calories from the junk food to fruit and vegetables. That there was so much food that we had to feed them 6 times a day because they couldn't eat it all at one time. So I think it actually has to do with the amount of fiber and just bulk food that you're giving them to keep. When we were doing isocaloric weight maintenance diets, so if you're trying to keep somebody at the same weight, you're feeding them just huge amounts of food. If you're trying to get them to lose weight, then you're resetting their weight, their brain weight, whatever, and that's different. I think that, that's harder to do. But just making it bulkier makes it easier for them to eat more and not be hungry.
Yeah, I have the same experience, and so I tell my patients, you must have food in your bag because you're going to get hungry and perhaps angry. And
Hungry and angry.
I was not angry, but I had cold hands at the beginning, and as you say, there was an adaptation period. So maybe it took a few months. And nowadays, I usually skip breakfast. If I, for some reason, don't have lunch, nothing happens. No cold hands. So I think there is an adaptation.
I have 2 comments now. I'm thinking from the commentaries we got in the questionnaires, there was, as I recall it, nothing about this that they were either angry or hungry, and we have also measured satiety. So, it's, from the studies, there are no difference in satiety between the diets in the groups, and also about the carbs. The way I see it, the Paleolithic diet is not a low-carb diet. It could be a low-carb diet, it could be a high-carb diet. So I would not just talk about it as a low-carb diet, and that would be the effects of it. Perhaps the low-carb version have this effect. I don't know. I haven't done the research.
I think this is, in my view, the good answer, because especially in France, they are in great difficulty to cut starches. I mean bread, I mean potatoes and so on, and it is the main issue. They complain about that.
Yeah. So I would argue that they wouldn't have to cut starch as much, because as we see, starch could very well be a part of Paleolithic diet, and that's like I said, interesting thing to write about when you write about what is Paleolithic diet, because we have so many opinions and versions of this, what is and what isn't Paleolithic diet. So we have to start.
Are not paleo.
No.
You agree?
That
Non-cellular starches are not paleo.
Yeah, those are in grains.
They are grains.
yes, cereal grains. We could agree.
Non-cellular, yeah, but
Yeah.
cellular tubers and so on
Yeah,
are a little bit paleo.
I would say that they are paleo.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
Can I ask
These are
one
very
quick
hard.
question?
Yeah.
You said your patients found the paleo diet difficult to adhere to. What do they mean by that? They just didn't like it, or
Metabolic
sorry,
adaptation.
Yeah.
because they were hungry? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think we didn't go back and do deep interviews.
Yeah.
So we just have the comments like, good for losing weight, but it's tough to stick on the diet. And I think that's because it's so much more different than the other diet from what we're used to eating. So like in terms of social pressure and what you can get at a pharmacy, that's the diet which is more different. So that's
To persevere longer.
yeah. So that's yeah. And like any diet, it's hard to stay on if not the entire society is eating like that. It's hard to stay on a diet. So.